This is Fred Richani of TSC News. I've right here via Skype a very special guest. He is the author of Blood Red Turns Dollar Green, the hit series that's been praised by everybody from Fergal Devitt, a.k.a. Finn Balor, Jim Ross, William Regal, Paul Heyman. The list goes on and on. Paul O'Brien is right here with us. Sir, how are you?
I'm great, Fred. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Now, you've been pretty busy these last couple of weeks, getting a lot of buzz for the latest book. For anybody that's not familiar with the series, without giving away too much, can you tell wrestling fans a little bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. These books are I suppose, the hardcore legend Mick Foley calls them the Godfather with suplexes, and who am I to argue with the hardcore legend? So these books are basically about an inter-blood feud between wrestling promoters starting in 1969 that goes all the way up to 1984. And, what I realized kind of early was that the setup of the old territory days is quite like the setup of, what we would understand to be the mafia setup. Like that each territory has a boss, each territory is a cash business with underbosses. It's really hard to get in. You avoid the government. You kind of keep your head underground, so to speak. So yeah, it has that kind of organized crime vibe to it.
So would you equate kind of like the territories in a way and their respective bosses kind of similar to like the five families in New York?
That's it. Yeah, well, you see, it came across to me that way, and that. No, I know, like, I've simplified it in the books that I have, 7 or 8 territories, but, at any one time there was 28 to 32 territories. So I've simplified it down, I've boiled it all down, but, the research in these novels have, gotten praise, like you said, from William Regal, for instance. I mean, this is a guy who never comes out, never endorses anything, kind of never really speaks on the record or off the record, apart from WWE DVDs, where I think he's a fantastic contributor. But he's never really come out and endorsed anything else. And we all know how protective he is of the business itself. And somebody like him, a direct quote from him is that he was in all the research that went into these novels. So very much so while kind of found in New York, I've also as well went to great detail to make sure that these have a realistic vibe to them as well.
All right, now you are a tremendous writer. You're also a huge wrestling fan. What came first for you in life? Your love for wrestling or your love for writing?
Well, for me, it was wrestling for sure. I'm probably 30 years of a wrestling fan at this stage, even though I'm 35 years old. And, to be a wrestling fan in Ireland 30 years ago was a lot different than being a wrestling fan, let's say, in the US 30 years ago. We're kind of, you guys, if you didn't get the national product, you certainly got your regional product. Over here, like we got absolutely nothing. I mean, there was no satellite here. There was very few magazines here. There was certainly no internet back then. So to be a wrestling fan 30 years ago in Ireland was, you'd have to be dedicated. Let's put it that way.
Who drew you into wrestling? Is there anybody in particular that you first saw on TV or in a magazine that just kind of captured your imagination?
For me, it was Hawk Who. I don't hear anybody, mention that name quite often as the name that pulled them in. Normally it's Hulk Hogan, or even if you go back further than that, it'd be someone like Bruno or superstar Billy Graham. But Hawk Who was the first professional wrestler that I ever saw. He and Barbarian were in a tag team match against, I can't remember who now, but it was those two guys who I kind of saw, one as the Barbarian usually muscled, the other guy was just like a tree trunk. I came to understand now that Hawk Who was probably the guy that you certainly wouldn't mess with him, Barbarian too, but Hawk Who, as we know, is widely regarded as one of the toughest guys ever to step in the ring. He just had a feel of authenticity about him, that everything he done was just looked brutal, and it was mostly chops and kicks and pressing kicks and that sort of stuff. So Hawk Who, definitely, he was the guy who pulled me in. He was the first guy I saw, and he was the guy that made me come back and look for more.
And how long was the process in terms of coming up with the concept of the first novel and then actually putting pen to paper?
Well, yeah, I mean, here in Ireland, I've been a professional writer for about 17 or 18 years. I've been very lucky that I've written roughly the same amount of players, about 17 players, and all of those have found houses here in Ireland and a little bit wider than that in the UK as well, on professional stages. So I was kind of lucky that way. So whilst I was a wrestling fan, I was also very much learning my trade as a writer as well. So I mean, coming up to about 15 years in as a writer, I started to think about it as well. You know, what I do for a living, is similar in the concept, not the execution, because obviously what they do is far more physical, but similar in the execution to what I understood professional wrestling to be. You know, as I found out about how it kind of worked, in that you get characters, you try and create conflict, and then you try and resolve that conflict in front of an audience. Again, how they do it is far more physical than how we do it, but you know, there was definitely similarities there. So I went about trying to figure that out. I talked to my writing friends. They were delighted that I was finally going to tackle a novel, because you know, a lot of them always maintained that my writing would suit that world. But when they heard I was going to write my first novels about professional wrestling, they were just they thought I was crazy, you know. They thought I should have just went down the traditional road of writing a crime novel or writing a like a detective series or something like that. But there was this story that was in me that I just wanted to tell about this world and how it was backstage. Now I wanted to make it fictional and I wanted to make it as entertaining as possible. But like I said, I definitely wanted to hang my hat on the realism of the time. So I suppose to answer your question, probably 2 years of research and a year of writing the first one. And then the second one was about a year all in all of research and writing. And then the third one was about 18 or 19 months of research and then writing. So these novels have been my life for the last 4 or 5 years. You know, I take it hugely seriously. I work at them every day. These aren't something that I just spit out over the weekend. That I don't write anything else when I'm writing these, so I stop all my other jobs and I focus in on these, and I write them as professionally as possible.
And given the amount of positive feedback that you've received for the first two and now for the third one, does it still surprise you these days to hear from pro wrestlers and other celebrities how great they are, or at this point is it business as usual?
It's really not. I mean, I'd love to say that I'm cynical or I'm kind of hardened, I'm crusted over at this stage. But a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from Bret Hart saying how much he loved the books, and I have to say that it was the very same vibe I got from the first time that Mick Foley said that he loved the books. It never gets old. I love the wrestling business. I understand that there's ebbs and flows, and the product has probably seen better days. But I'm a fan. I'm in this for the long haul, so I don't mind what probably insiders would call marking out. I don't mind that at all. I do it with pleasure. These guys. I mean, how often do you get an email from Bret Hart? And you think that that he took the time to kind of sit wherever he sits in Calgary and go through a novel like this and give me notes on it, just to kind of blow my mind. So to answer your question, it never gets old, and I hope it never does get old.
And what's your opinion right now of some of the standout Irish professional wrestlers that are now currently in WWE, such as Sheamus, Becky Lynch, and Fergal Devitt?
All three. I mean, it seems to me, which is a good thing, that Sheamus is on the verge of something different. Which I think that's a great thing. I think Sheamus, the character, is probably a natural heel, maybe the person a natural heel. I think anybody who hasn't seen Devitt is just in for a treat. And anybody who has the network, or anybody who's able to get access to NXT can see just how unique and brilliant Becky Lynch is as a wrestler. But of all three, I have to say that I'm a huge fan of Prince Devitt. He's a huge fan of these books as well. He helped me out on the third novel. I had great access to him. He walked me through there's Japanese scenes in the third novel. He was there. He was hugely open. I asked him to describe for me, a very famous steakhouse in Japan that that ended up in the book. That is not the Ribera but and he was superb. I mean, he described the smells, the sounds, everything for me. So, to again just make these novels as authentic as possible, to have somebody like that who started off in the dojo and spent many years over there as one of the top stars, as we know. Where else could you get access like that? So definitely, and like Ireland is kind of cooking at the moment as well in terms of its independent scene over here. There's a guy over here called Joey Cabra who was part of NXT and just came home. He's out there lighting a fire under the independent scene here as well. Like, so, all bodes well for the future of Irish wrestling.
That is definitely good to hear. Now, I understand you are a fan of Boardwalk Empire. You've compared your novels to Boardwalk Empire. Spoiler alert, everybody! I'm also a huge fan of Boardwalk Empire, and I gotta ask you, what did you think of the huge plot twist at the end, where it turned out to be Jimmy Darmity's son at the end killing Nucky?
Well, I have to say, I'd love to put my hand up and say I spotted that 4 or 5 episodes ago. I didn't. When he walked up behind him, of course, I'm sure they filmed this and spent hours doing this, he looked like Jimmy. He had his hair slicked back. He had that look. He was kind of looking from the side of his eye. And it was only then that it hit me. My God, because I kept saying to my wife as we were watching it, why are they highlighting this young guy so much when there's only 2 hours left? I couldn't understand how they were trying to, as in the wrestling business, put over this young guy so much when, he didn't have a name, we don't know who he is, and we're running out of time here. Surely they're going to, finish up the classic characters before they try and birth somebody new. But when he pulled out that gun and where the bullet hit, of course, the very same place that it hit Jimmy. Poetic symmetry, I think is what it's called. It was a beautiful thing.
Definitely. It just amazes me, though. I mean, you watch WWE right now, and with all due respect to their writers and everything, there's a lot of logic holes, to put it lightly, in regards to their programming right now. And you watch a show like Boardwalk Empire, pretty incredible show. It all makes sense, especially at the end. You watch Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Mad Men, House of Cards. I mean, you name it. Most major shows on TV that are successful have logic, and they have some swerves here and there. But at the end of the day, everything makes sense. Well, for the most part, it makes sense. Why is it so? As a writer, I gotta ask you this: why is it so hard for some of these guys in WWE to have such continuity issues?
I have no idea. It's like somewhere along the way, maybe a kind of Russo deal or something like that, that the swerve became the only writing tool available to wrestling. And it made absolutely no sense to me. I mean, I can understand, we said the Attitude Era was born roughly around the same time as kind of South Park hit its peak and Jerry Springer was around. The Attitude Era was kind of, almost like a child of its time. But it seems to me that it's stuck there. It's stuck in this kind of, women can only be crazy, or, they can watch your back, they're manipulative. Like the only way we can get you on your feet here is to swerve everybody, and the authority figure is the only way that we're ever going to progress storylines. Whereas, like you said, if you look at, in the same way that the Attitude Era was a child of its time, I dearly wish that professional wrestling would just take a little breath, have a look around, and see the magnificent television that's on US TV at the moment. I mean, we're leaders, your country has been for easy 2 decades. And just to see how a little bit of subtlety and how a little bit of logical storytelling can pull in humongous audiences and can be wildly entertaining and, if you like, keep the PG sticker. Breaking Bad, as far as I know, stopped any language in the 2nd season, bad language. There was no scenes of nudity or anything like that. No, obviously there were scenes of kind of drug taking and so on and so on. But even that wasn't what it was about. It was about the subtlety of the chase for Walt, building up the empire. Professional wrestling could be that. And I have argued in my Wrestling Observer columns for a while that, for me, that's the future of professional wrestling. It always has been a child of its time. If you go back to the kind of glory days, the television era of the 50s, or the kind of smoky background of the 70s, the Attitude Era, or the rock and wrestle era. I mean, what typifies more a period of time than MTV and WWF at the time getting together and being a child of its time? It seems the product at the moment is kind of floating around. It's almost like it's decadeless in where it's trying to fit itself.
It does seem, I mean, not that the product is enjoyable at times. I feel like it's not. It doesn't feel cool. You know what I'm saying? There's something about the product that doesn't feel cool, doesn't feel original. And I think especially now because they're trying to be more entertainment than sport. And now they got the new TV deal and everything. If you're entertainment, you're going to be compared to Boardwalk Empire. You're going to be compared to other shows on HBO and Showtime. And I just think you got to step your game up when it comes to Logic.
And that's it, you know. And if I was Vince or Triple H or Stephanie, I would take on that challenge. I would say, okay, all the television that surrounds us is top-notch television. You know, the huge budgets. I know wrestling doesn't have to have that, but huge budgets. They're pulling in. Like, I wrote a column for Wrestling Observer once that when the Performance Center opened, they scoured the world looking for athletic talent, and so they should. They bring in referees, and so they should. They bring in commentators, and so they should. Where is the scout that goes from one corner of the world to the other to find writers? Bookers, call them whatever you like, but IDs, men, women. Where is the person that brings those guys in, puts them in a classroom, shows them what has worked, you know, since the first day of professional wrestling up to now, and bleed them in, use them as writers, rather than, you know, kind of bringing in, you know, 10 writers this year, getting rid of 8, maybe keeping one, then one, you know, another guy gets disillusioned and leave. I mean, I'd ask the question, has there ever been a bigger turnover in the wrestling business than in the writers' room? I mean, who's writing for WWE anymore, and how long have they been there? What's the average length for a WWE writer, and why is that?
Well, I guess maybe we answer our own question about the continuity and Logic issues, right? Because a couple years ago, they were on kind of a roll heading into SummerSlam, and then their head writer left, and then the TV went to hell. And then this year, right before SummerSlam, actually, they laid off, I think, 60 people, over 60 employees, and many of them included writers.
Yes.
So, hey, it is what it is. Hopefully it does get better, though. Hopefully they'll hire you. We'll see.
Come get me, Vince. Come get me.
Come get him. Now, you are in Ireland, so I do have to ask this question. I don't know if you're a UFC fan or not, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on Conor McGregor, the rising star in the UFC's featherweight division. And is this guy, I mean, is the hype for him for real? I mean, you hear Dana White talking about him all the time. I'm not there in that country, so I don't know. Is Conor McGregor the real deal?
Absolutely, he's the real deal. And Conor McGregor, I think, is probably the best professional wrestler in the world right now. He gets the power of talking him into the building. Pick up that microphone, make a name for yourself. You were an absolute nobody 2 years ago. And now everybody is asking about Conor McGregor. Apart from that, I think his last few fights have shown as well that he is talented, he is motivated, and I don't think he's ever going to skip gym day. And I think, you know, for Conor McGregor, he needs that. He needs to keep flourishing, he needs to keep getting better, and I think, you know, nobody in the world has to tell this guy that. So at the moment, he's still hugely hungry. He's very, very intelligent in that, you know, he's the type of guy who goes through literature to find great lines like, we're not here to take part, we're here to take over. And he writes them down. And, you know, any advice that you can give to like an up-and-coming professional wrestler is to do at least that. Scour great speeches, scour great literature, and find those little gems in there that you can write down on your pad and just wait for the right time to introduce them. Because Conor McGregor is so put together. It looks like that's coming off the top of his head all the time, which is the way it should look to anybody, you know, down through the ages, like some of the greatest talkers like a Billy Graham, or even going back to Gorgeous George, the way he used the microphone, the way Muhammad Ali saw that, and he used the microphone in the same way, you know, up to the present day, some of the great talkers like The Rock. I think Conor McGregor has to be put at least in the start of that bracket, because he's only, you know, in relative terms and time, length of time, he's only been around for, you know, a certain amount of time. But he should at least be put in that bracket with an asterisk, you know, as he proves himself even further. But certainly, Over here, he has raised awareness of UFC. I know you saw the UFC pay-per-view here from Ireland. He got on kind of national TV here, first person ever to do it. And he was the guy who made the normal person at the bus stop talk about this cage fight, making it exciting. Someone like me, I've been a UFC fan for many years, but he's definitely brought it to the mainstream.
So in North America here, it feels like it's kind of the support for UFC is kind of waning. Very oversaturated, as you know, especially as a guy that does contribute to WrestlingObserver.com. We see Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez write and talk about this all the time. But would you say, I guess, McGregor's kind of ushering a boom period in Ireland?
Definitely here in Ireland, for sure. I mean, he's not messing when he says that he could, sell out one of our soccer stadiums, like a 40,000, a 60,000 seater. I do agree with you, though. I think UFC as a whole, I think, Dana's business model, his Logic model, which was to be everywhere all the time, for me just isn't working. I mean, even 2-3 years ago, I used to count down, the UFC numbers like everybody else. I used to buy the pay-per-views. I used to be always guaranteed at least a great main event and an under main event. But now, UFC numbers can tick by me now, and I don't even realize that there's been, another UFC event, just because the amount of saturation out there. But certainly over this side of the world, Dana knows he can bring Conor McGregor to this little country anytime. He can put him against basically anybody, and he can fill out whatever soccer stadium he likes.
Definitely. Now, sir, before I let you go, where can fans find you and Blood Red Turns Dollar Green Volume 3?
Well, Fred, I suppose the easiest place is to come to my website, which is paulobrien.info. And all the links there are for Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. You get to see what everybody in the wrestling business is saying about these novels. At the moment, I'm giving away a Volume 1 for free today on Reddit and Ask Me Anything. So if you want to go to paulobrien.info/free, you get Volume 1 ebook for any device you like for free. I want to make this get as wide as possible. I want to say to people who are curious, listen, I'm pretty sure that if you're a wrestling fan, you like to read, and if you read Volume 1, I'm pretty confident that you would stay with this series. This is what readers have told me. And of course, these books have been #1 in Spain and Germany and the US and the UK and Mexico and Australia. So the numbers suggest that people who get the first novel, they stay with the journey, and that's my hope. So it's no risk. Come to paulobrien.info and find out.
Excellent. Well, sir, we really do appreciate the time. And hey, you get Volume 1 for free. You get the WWE Network for free all in the same month. Oh, except in the UK and Ireland. But
15 minutes to show time. I was like, no.
Actually, one more question about the network. How disappointed are you that it's not in Ireland yet?
Well, the point I always try to make is, I want, and we all want the WWE Network to succeed. We want WWE to succeed because it really is like the only big, horse left in the race. But I don't understand what they're selling. Like, I'm a nerd. I can build a computer, I can strip it down, I can build a computer. I'm that type of a nerd. I don't understand what the WWE Network is if I'm a just an average fan. Like for instance, HBO doesn't go out and say HBO has a channel. HBO goes out and sells its content on the channel. Like, what do I get? I understand the pay-per-views, but what do I get? Why do I want to make a monthly commitment, a 6-monthly commitment, a 12-monthly commitment? Like, when I go onto the WWE Network, and let's just say I want to start off at the Nitro where Lex Luger shows up in the shopping mall. Like, where's the Raw after that? And then where's the pay-per-view at the end of that month? Like, where's the consistency? I'm sure you see this as well. If you go on and you look for Nitro, I think it's like 401 or something they're calling it, and then 402 is somewhere else, but it's not in chronological order. And if you want to find a Raw that matches that, then good luck to you, because you have to get out your calculator, a T-square, a sliding rule to try and figure out exactly, what was the Raw opposite that Nitro. And they make it so hard to find content that even when you get there, it's so hard to find content. I can understand the teething problems it has, but You know, just start with the small stuff, guys. Like Netflix or you know, as we all know, they'll suggest, you know, if you look at a certain type of comedy or whatever, they'll suggest another one straight away. And just even kind of get that engine going. Because, you know, for me, it's not about how many new people are joining the network. You know, net new people, about 31,000. It's the hundreds of thousands of people who've tried it and left. I think that's where the story is. You know, how many hardcore wrestling fans have bought this, or even not even hardcore wrestling fans? Why did they leave? Is probably the issue that's going to surround the network for me.
I totally agree, and Nate, you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, whether it's Netflix, whether it's HBO Go, no matter what it is, it's about the content. It's not about the price.
Exactly.
It's never been about the price. WrestleMania was $75. What, just a year ago?
Yep.
And most people bought it. I mean, I think it was the second purchase WrestleMania of all time. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the content. And the content in your novel, sir, is excellent. So I really do appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Folks, if you want more info on Paul O'Brien, how ironic, paulobrien.info. You can also follow him on Twitter @tweetpaulO'Brien. Thank you so much, sir.